Hello, I'm Dr. Mike Searcy. In the name of previewing what you are about to see with respect to my online teaching demonstration, I want to invite you to think about and watch for the following. The learning demonstration will consist of two pre-recorded parts. The first is a clip from a recorded webinar that I conducted for professional development for a group of about 527 to about 537 teaching professionals. Communication management is often enhanced if there is a moderator present to assist with moderating for written questions in the chat boxes, etc. And that was what was done here, especially with the large number of individuals. Of course, with smaller numbers of individuals, a moderator is not necessarily necessary with respect to being able to watch for things, but this was a presentation geared at a greater scale. I chose not to edit even the portion out that contained an interruption, as I believe it is important to see how the system might also flow with respect to communication in a webinar and how it might actually be suitable for what we do with respect to online learning and online teaching. The topic is a presentation of some of the collected research on generation and generational studies. It's a series that I present to my communication students along with things like audience analysis, verbal communication, nonverbal communication, the principles of communication, stages of friendship, and even Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the work of Martin Buber and the like, in order for them to start trying to look at the connections that they're doing between the research, the work that we talk about with respect to concepts in class, and then analyzing that interpersonal communication in action as it's taking place. How I do that is with service learning. The second part of, after the clip of the webinar, I want to just suggest that we're going to move into at that point a small clip of me explaining the purpose in a classroom, pre-recorded version of that, of the actual service learning. Okay, please note that in the webinar I refer to page 3. I have included that as an attachment with this video. Part 2, as I just mentioned, is a clip where I describe the purpose of service learning and the assignment which comes out of it in part in this presentation. This is just a couple of minutes of me in the classroom explaining a bit about the project. Complete details are also included with this video as a Word document assignment. So pairing the two together and you should have a really good idea of what we do with it. Okay, so what are we covering in this teaching demonstration? The first thing with respect to our objectives today is to look at a webinar demo. It's on generational research. And the second thing we're going to look at is classroom interaction. And in that classroom interaction I'm going to cover the purpose of the service learning project. And then finally I'll come back and we'll look at a review of online teaching and what I believe was covered with all of this. I appreciate your indulging me with this preview. Much like a Start Here button that we might put in an online college course in the Blackboard shell or in Canvas or wherever, to give our students a good start and a roadmap for learning as to start here, follow these steps. Thank you very much. Let's take a look at part 1.
So if you're following along in the action guide, I'm going to go back into that in just a couple of moments, but let's go ahead and turn to page 3 and glance at the generational issue I referenced earlier. Who are our students? Well, we don't really talk about, when we start talking about generations, we don't typically talk about the traditionals anymore, which were those that came before the baby boomers, because many of those and the majority of those you're not going to see in any of our classrooms. At least it would be a very unique situation when and if that did happen. The baby boomers are the ones, though, that we want to pay attention to up front. Those are the ones that we still have a number of students that come through a lot of our classes, depending upon the school, the class, the major, and the interest, especially if they're trying to reinvent themselves at many different points. Generation X are the students that we often refer to that were born around 65 to 1978. And then we will start talking much more about our Generation Y and Generation Z. We hear a lot more talk now about millennials because the millennials, a lot of them are now in, traditional age college students that are hanging around colleges. But the Generation Z, our digital natives, are coming right up behind them. And it's not going to be too much longer before we start seeing them. And we probably ought to start thinking about how we're going to approach their teaching and learning and kind of getting involved with who they are. And I've got some description of those on page 3 of that action guide. But let's look at a couple of highlights from that page on the next couple of slides. The baby boomers, which were born in 46 to 65 approximately, a couple of things I want to pick out and point out because I think this is very pertinent to how we look at them with respect to developing their professionalism from the classroom to the workplace. Now, many of them really kind of grew up believing in their job, and this is the group that often very traditionally defined themselves by their profession or the work that they did and are doing. So it's the I am my job. They live to work. And when you ask them who are they, you're basically looking at the people who will define themselves by profession. I am a teacher. I am a plumber. I am an executive. I am a business owner, however it might be. Loyalty is very important to them, and they pay real close attention to loyalty and spend a lot of time, generally speaking, a lot of time being loyal to those who are loyal to them and the company that they serve. Now, when I'm talking about these, of course, let's make sure that we're understanding not every unique case is going to fall into these categories, that when this research is done, we're talking about general trends. Baby boomers are all about process over results. There is a process to getting things done. You don't skip over the process, and you got to kind of take things in steps. Typically, they are conflict adverse. They try to avoid conflict. And here's where we're going to start the conversation about teamwork and team players versus individuals who are much more interested in not being a team player and paying attention to themselves. For the baby boomer, information is power. This is where we want to be able to have all the information, and it might be very much because they see themselves as vital to success and the success of those around them to whom they're loyal, or their profession, or the work in which they're part of. So those organizations become really important to them, and they don't do a whole lot of job jumping, a lot of job skipping. Once they commit to a process, they're usually there for the long haul. The next one, the Generation X group. These are the students that are born around 1965 through 1978. Now, here's the caveat and the difference. They're loyal, but typically only to good leadership. They're very, as opposed to the last generation we just talked about, being very team-oriented, Generation X is all about independent working. And instead of process-driven, they have a tendency to be much more competency-driven. In other words, if I'm good at this and I can prove my competency, then I'm not all that interested in the process. Just go ahead and give me my rewards because I've proven myself. And so we're looking at the idea of competency over process here. I've connected my priorities and support interests that are connected there. If I'm going to be loyal to good leadership, but my priorities are going to be specific to my interests, not necessarily the interests of the organization itself. And when we start dealing with students that are from this generation, we need to recognize and perhaps start appealing to their interests as far as why this class or why this assignment, whatever it might be that we recognize would make them and help them be successful, how do we connect it to their interests and thus develop their competencies? Because learning needs to be done on their terms, and you need to be able to see and they need to be able to show results. The next one, 1979 to 1990, we're talking about the Millennials here. This is the generation that's currently getting a lot of press. This is the generation that we're talking about a casual relationship at work, meaning there's not a whole lot of recognition about the formality of an organizational hierarchical structure. They expect the ability to be constantly connected. These are the ones that, if they haven't got a tattoo, a working tattoo of their iPod on their wrist, they've got the iPod itself sewn into the palm of their hand. They expect constant connection. They also expect open access to all information. They want the ability, because this is the group that we start looking at as having a good chunk of them having grown up completely online, plugged in. This is the group that started a lot of the trend of, instead of, now many of you will recognize the comparison and the contrast here, but you will recognize that when we were growing up, some of us, depending upon our generation, we would come home from school, and perhaps what we did is we went out and played with the neighbor kids. What did we learn? We learned about interpersonal connection, and we learned about being able to, if I smile at somebody, somebody else is going to smile back at me. I learned about consequences. If I hit somebody, somebody else was going to probably hit me back. Whereas this is the group that was. Yes. Is there a question?
Let me just find this pause to ask everyone to mute their phones at *6. Unmute with #6, please.
Thank you, Zola. Okay, so what we're looking at is the idea with, when we talk about these millennials, these are the ones that oftentimes, if they grew up online, this is the generation that started much more about online gaming, or video games, or computer games, or lots and lots of TV. And this is the generation that had what we call a constant reset button. Part of the problem with the constant reset button is that we wind up not necessarily realizing that reset buttons don't exist in real life. And so I wind up being able to reset, but I often ignore, because I never really learned, if I'm part of this generation, that the principle of communication that suggests communication is irreversible. So I might say something that would be offensive to you, but in fact, there's no reset button, so consequences happen. And I may not have gotten that if I grew up in this generation and was part of the group that was plugged in. Now, one of the other interesting things about this group, however, is they started to see early on that being connected can certainly work on and advance various missions and visions, and they wanted to do so and be involved, and do want to do so and also be involved. They see the connection between technology and their visions, the visions they've accepted or gotten into, and they're able to work with this. They require a lot of recognition, because this is the group, more so than previous generations, they want to make sure that they have been heard. They want to believe that they are being listened to, and they want to believe that their word means something and are being paid attention to. As such, we note that in the research, there's no tolerance in this generation typically for being excluded, but unlike the previous generation, we've kind of taken the pendulum swing back, and maybe this is because of those multiplayer role games that are on computer and various other things. We've got much more team players who recognize how technology can certainly be part of encouraging and connecting that team. The group that's coming up, the digital natives, these are the ones that we're going to start seeing real quick here in a lot of our school classrooms. Digital natives, Generation Z, we refer to them, born between the years 1990 and 2004 approximately. These are the ones that we might talk about where they have little need for privacy, or as I like to put it, they're open Kindles. We might have referred to that as open book earlier, but a lot of them have never opened a book in many cases because they've been reading everything that they've got online. And a lot, an actual page, a book that they're turning the pages on, something that might sit on shelves or a centerpiece on a table. They've got bite-sized attention spans in many cases, and my theory, my opinion, I'm going to go ahead and venture the guess that our media, as a communications scholar, I've been looking into this idea that our media basically does this for us, bite-sized attention spans. If you think about commercials and television now, as opposed to 20, 30, 40 years ago, television and commercials, very quick colors, everything comes at a machine gun pace. And when it does that, we're forced to constantly keep switching our attention and our focus. This is the group that's very social network savvy because they grew up on social network. It's what I call living out loud. Everything they do, everywhere they go, is somehow put up. on their their favorite social media locations. So people can follow them wherever they are physically because they're announcing it electronically. Now, unlike our generation Y, this group is showing signs again based on the data that the pendulum is swinging again, and here we're talking about a lot of individualists all over again. Their strategy is directly connected to instant gratification. They want it now. There's little understanding of the idea of consequences, as we talked about before with the generation Y kind of getting into that. Here, there's little understanding of consequences. If for any other reason, they haven't had a whole lot of experience as they were growing up, because they were growing up plugged in. They haven't had a whole lot of experience interacting with other individuals face to face. Everything has been online. And as such, there's very little tolerance for being ignored. All right, having said that, I guess one of the questions that I'm going to have, Zola, if we can do a chat box check, let's go ahead and put it out there. What kind of students are you dealing with from what generation, and do you see this as matching the students that you're dealing with?
Hi, this is Dr. Mike Searcy. We've just completed the portion, part 1 of the teaching demonstration, being the clip from the online webinar that was given to about 527 to about 537 professional teachers at colleges and universities. We're going to move now into part 2, where I spend some time in a classroom talking about the purpose of the Service Learning Project. The project which is fully explained in the syllabus attachment that comes with this video. For the next section, you might have to turn up the volume a little bit of the of your monitor of your speakers, primarily because the recording level and the differences in the recording level were a bit two different recording systems. One was a headset for the webinar, and the other in the classroom was a digital video camera that was at the back of the classroom. So although you could probably hear it, but there will be a little bit of a drop in volume, and if that's kind of a bother to you, you want to turn that up just a little bit in preparation. Okay, thanks. And now here's part 2.
The service learning takes it to the next step. I've had a lot of positive feedback over the years whenever we've done any kind of service learning project. Most people might even grouse about it at the beginning and then at the end tell me it's one of the best learning experiences they've ever had. I did not answer the question that I asked of us earlier when we talked about how do we actually get interpersonal communication to fulfill the oral communication component requirement of your overall degree, especially when people are taking interpersonal communication online and might only take it online, not see anybody, and they can theoretically hide behind the computer and not have any face-to-face interaction because they're reading the book, taking the test, writing some assignments, and out the door they go. Whereas the people who are earning their oral communication course in public speaking, even when they're taking public speaking from me online, they have to find 10 adult audience members, for example, who are not their immediate family as an audience for every one of their speeches. And I need to see all 10 audience members throughout the entire course of the speech as it's uploaded, or the speech doesn't count. So we look at this and say, how do we answer that question for interpersonal communication? And at this point, we're answering that question with what project that I'm referring to as service learning. I'm also calling it interpersonal, interactive communication and application of practice. You know, I said I had this great PhD from the University of Iowa. One of the things I disliked about a PhD program is that they spend an awful lot of time talking about theory and very, very little time talking about how does this theory connect to real life. And if we can't connect it, it's useless to everybody. That's what this is about. Finding a place in your community where you can contribute. And what you're going to wind up doing is interacting on a regular basis with people. And I want you to think about these concepts and how they've applied that we're talking about. But at the same time, what are you doing? You're making a connection and a contact who may very well be your next reference letter writer, who could very well help you get that next job. And the experience alone you can put on your resume. So we're taking the communication and going far into the application realm and saying, how is this really going to help you? And if you pick a project and start looking for a project where it would actually be related to what your future career goals are, you may find yourself really helping yourself. I've got some people who are accounting majors who have already sent me messages saying they'd like to go and work with this particular organization that does taxes for low-income individuals. I think what a marvelous idea. Talk about the experience they're gaining in their field and potentially a letter writer, if not someone who may even potentially hire them in the future. And that's what this all is here. And this is where you upload those things. The final project, as outlined in your syllabus, needs to be one of two things. Either a 20 PowerPoint slide presentation covering all the points specific to your all the points specific in your syllabus and the criteria that we talk about.
Hello, I'm Dr. Mike Searcy. In the interest of time, I will conclude those video demonstrations and leave them there. I want to thank you for spending the time to view them and potentially engage the material presented. Let's review what was covered here. First, I contend that I have demonstrated competent use of the following technologies as they might be used in online learning. The first being a webcam, Blackboard, which is where all of the actual course material is housed, webinar use, especially on a large scale use. This is really a great format for that. Video rendering, as you can see here by watching this video itself, classroom interaction, recording of classroom, live performance, if you will, live classes, engaging in topical discussion, as well as good standard adult learning theory, which often includes previewing, viewing, and reviewing. High levels of interaction might come from chat boxes and online webinars. The greater number of people, communication efficiency is enhanced with the assistance of a moderator. No matter the channel of delivery, I think and I believe that service learning, internships, volunteer service, no matter what you call it at any level, allows us to see the practical communication in action sequences, if only we take the time to stop and reflect. And of course, the experiential value itself is absolutely, positively invaluable. I will leave you with that thought there. Remember, I am happy to entertain questions if you would like to follow up with me. Again, I'm Dr. Mike Searcy, and I appreciate your taking the time to review my demonstration. Have a great day.